They called him a fake veteran at the bank until an angry general walked in. Robert Bobby King wasn't looking for attention that quiet Tuesday morning. He wasn't there to make a scene, to show off medals, or to boast of bygone battles. He simply wanted to withdraw a few $100s from an old account he hadn't touched in years. The same account where decades ago he deposited his hazardous duty pay for deployments the government still hasn't fully acknowledged. He entered Summit Rich National Bank through the main doors like anyone else, steady, composed, hat in hand. His cap, black with gold embroidery, reading Korea-Vietnam veteran, had been brushed before he left home. His shirt was freshly pressed, though the cuffs were frayed, and tucked in his coat pocket were a Veterans Affairs ID card, 2 faded discharge papers, and a brass challenge coin smoothed at the edges by years of handling. He joined the line, patiently and silently, as the men of his generation always did, as if waiting one's turn remained sacred. But when he reached the teller's window, everything changed. The young cashier, perhaps in her early 20s, blinked at the name on his account and raised a skeptical brow. Bobby offered his ID, his hands trembling slightly, not from fear but from the wear of time and too many cold nights in nameless places. "I'm just trying to make a withdrawal," he said politely. "This account is in Robert King's name. It's been a while." Her fingers tapped the keyboard, then paused. Something on the screen didn't match her expectations. She summoned her manager, Caden, pristine haircut, far too short tie, and a smirk that needed no words to insult. He peered at Bobby's paperwork, then at Bobby himself, and let out a laugh that wasn't friendly. "You sure this is your account, sir?" he drawled, stretching the "sir" like a joke. "This discharge form looks like it was written on a dinosaur." The teller gave a nervous giggle. Bobby said nothing. He slipped his hand into his coat and placed something on the counter with careful deliberation. A brass challenge coin stamped with thunderbolts and stars. Something no civilian would recognize, but something any genuine soldier would hold his breath over. Caden didn't even glance at it. "Nice trinket," he muttered. "Anyone can buy those online these days." Then he signaled to the security guard. "I think we've got another so-called veteran trying to game the system. Escort him out, please." The guard hesitated just long enough for Bobby to hear every humiliating word, and for everyone else in the bank to realize what was happening. A few customers snickered behind their phones. 1 or 2 pretended not to hear. Bobby didn't argue or demand respect. He simply retrieved the coin, slid it back into his pocket, nodded once, and moved toward a bench by the window. He sat up, straight, hands folded in his lap, eyes staring at nothing in particular. The laughter died down, replaced by an unsettling hush. It wasn't pity, not yet, just discomfort, as if everyone suddenly wasn't quite sure who they were dealing with. Yet one person didn't laugh. Maya Rodriguez, 30-something, a former Air Force logistics specialist now working in defense contracting, recognized the coin. Years ago, a retired JSOC colonel had laid one of those coins on the briefing table, and every officer in the room had risen to their feet. She strode to the counter, fixed Caden with a steady gaze, and said, "You've made a mistake." Caden blinked. "Excuse me?" Maya pointed. "That man is not a fraud. That coin alone ranks higher than every paycheck this bank issues." Caden scoffed. "If it's so special, why isn't anyone standing with him?" Maya said nothing. She simply stepped outside to make a call. But someone else was already acting. In the back office, a long-time, low-profile employee, no big title, but with all the institutional memory, heard the name Robert King. He paused, then walked slowly to a brass plaque on the wall listing the bank's founders and original command staff. Among those names was R. Cota King, the very man who'd overseen the military base that once occupied this land before it became this bank. He didn't speak. He picked up the phone and dialed a number only a handful of people memorized. "It's Bishop Coyne. Summit Rich has him inside." Then he hung up. Out front, Bobby remained motionless. He didn't pull out his phone or cause a scene. He just watched as the flag outside dipped in the breeze and waited. Not for justice, not for praise, but because that's what men like him did. They waited until the moment they were needed. They waited even when no one believed them. They waited while the world laughed. But what no one at the bank knew, not the manager, not the teller, not even Maya, was that in 30 minutes, that laughter would give way to silence. 2 blocks. Away, a black SUV roared through traffic, its lights flashing once to signal authority without asking permission. Inside sat Major General Everett Kane, decorated, feared, renowned for his precision, now head of regional operations over 4 military districts, and one of only 5 living men authorized to issue an active bishop-level recognition. When he heard the name Robert King, he slammed his phone on the desk, donned his dress uniform, and announced to his aide, "Uniform on, let's go." King wasn't just a file in an archive to Kane. He was the reason Kane wore those stars. A living legend, believed long gone, the kind of figure whispered about in strategy sessions and legacy reports. Kane had trained under doctrines the younger general helped write. Having that man publicly insulted in uniform, on ground his name helped secure, ignited a fury Kane rarely showed. Back at the bank, fluorescent lights hummed overhead, but no one spoke. A customer by the coffee station left mid-transaction. A security guard hovered near the exit, glancing at the elderly man who hadn't threatened anyone, never raised his voice but still radiated an authority that made the staff uneasy. Caden leaned against the counter. "He's probably just fishing for pity fund clicks online," he scoffed to a junior teller. "Vets pull that all the time." Maya clenched her jaw. Even the teller looked down, ashamed. Caden straightened proudly. "I should have called the cops." He laughed. "It's only a matter of time before he throws a fit." But as the words left his mouth, the bank's glass doors burst open. Boots, real boots, hit the tile floor. In perfect cadence. Deliberate, neither rushed nor hesitant. Major General Kane entered in full dress uniform, every ribbon gleaming, every crease pressed to perfection, an imposing presence that filled the lobby before he even spoke. His aide followed solemnly, briefcase in hand. No one moved. The chatter stopped and phones were put away. Caden, still at the counter, looked up, smile gone, frozen in place. Kane's eyes locked on Bobby seated by the window. Then, snapping. To attention, he saluted. The crisp clap of his palm against his thigh reverberated louder than any apology could. Bobby looked up, startled for a moment, then returned the salute with the dignity of a man who hadn't been saluted in years, but never forgot how. Kane slowly swept his gaze across the room and spoke in a low, cutting voice. "Who here called Colonel Robert King a fraud?" Each word was etched in steel. At first there was silence. Kane stepped forward. "Colonel King," he repeated, emphasizing the rank, "helped establish the Joint Force Recognition protocols still used by 3 allied nations. His record spans 2 wars, 6 theaters, and 14 unacknowledged operations. You questioned his identity." All eyes turned to Caden, whose face drained of color. He stammered, I didn't know. The papers were old." "Of course they're old," Kane snapped. "Because he earned them." The lobby's tension shifted from discomfort to shame. Kane's aide set the briefcase on the counter and opened it, revealing a thick folder stamped "Classified," a velvet-lined case cradling a commemorative coin and a printed replica of the bank's own brass plaque with Robert King's name boldly inscribed. Kane placed the folder on the counter. "This bank stands on land he once commanded. That account you flagged, it financed the original supply lines you now benefit from." He turned to Bobby, voice gentler. "Sir, I regret not knowing you were in town." Bobby nodded wearily. "I didn't come to be found. I only needed enough for my grandson's school fees." Kane nodded. "Then let's make it happen." Together, they approached the counter as Caden backed away, hands raised. The laughter had long since died, replaced by a lesson just beginning. The silence in Summit Ridge National Bank was no longer awkward, it was reverent. Every person present bore witness to a shift so profound it felt as though the floor itself remembered the weight it once bore. Major General Everett Kane stood beside Colonel Robert King at the teller's window, offering no commands, calling for no punishment, simply standing until the man everyone scorned, the man they called a fraud, would never again be overlooked. Bobby withdrew his funds without fanfare, just enough to pay for his grandson's university tuition, something he hadn't even mentioned until the general spoke. The teller's hand shook as she printed his receipt and whispered an apology that Bobby never acknowledged, not out of bitterness, but because he didn't need it. He took the receipt, folded it once, and slipped it into his pocket as if it were just another completed mission. But when he turned to leave, General Kane placed a hand on his shoulder. "Colonel, you have 5 minutes," he said. Bobby raised an eyebrow. "For what?" Kane nodded toward the lobby. "For the honor you never asked for." Then, without another command, every uniformed veteran in the room, from the young reservist at the ATM to the old petty officer filling out a deposit slip, rose and saluted. Even the civilians stood, not because they were told to, but because something in the air made it right. Bobby froze, not from pride, but disbelief, then slowly returned the salute with quiet precision. Kane reached into his coat pocket and handed him a small, polished case. "We've held on to this for years," he said. Inside lay a medal engraved with one name and 3 words, "Service Beyond Record." Bobby stared at it long and wordlessly. No tears, no speeches, just a slow nod, as if he'd finally closed a door no one else knew was still open. Then, quietly, he said, "I didn't come here to be remembered. I came to keep my promise." Kane nodded. "By doing so, you reminded us all what service truly means." Colonel King stepped into the sunlight. No cameras followed, no headlines were written. But inside the bank, everyone stood a little taller, spoke a little softer. That week, a second line was added under the bank's original dedication plaque. "By the front entrance, Robert R. King, Colonel, U.S. Army, honor in silence." It didn't recount what happened. It didn't name the general. But everyone who worked there knew, because some truths don't need to be shouted to change everything. And now, whenever a customer crosses those doors, they see the name of the man who was almost escorted out with laughter, the man who stayed silent until a general arrived, and they remember